From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
The U.S. suffers over 7 ransomware attacks an hour. President Biden gives President Putin a no-hacking list. And Rock You 2021 means 8.4 billion passwords leaked online. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's Cybersecurity Headlines. And now we're going to get a chance for some insight, some opinion, and some expertise on these stories from our guest, who this week is Peter Liebert, who is CISO at Cerner Government Services. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We are, again, having a busy time with our news. So much is going on this week, and so I just want to get into it as quickly as possible. But before we start, I just want to remind everybody that our show is being brought to you today by Kiavi, and they have some fantastic technology that I want to share with you a little bit later on. And also, if you are joining us live, consider joining us on Crowdcast, where you can share your comments, and we'll keep an eye on those as we go through the show. And you can also make comments on Twitter with the hashtag @CISOSeries or @StephenPrentice, as you wish. So we just have 20 minutes to go through and have a look at some of these stories here. So the number one is, as I just led off here, what seems to be a pretty remarkable number, that the U.S. is suffering over 7 ransomware attacks per hour, and that is based on just the numbers from last year. 65,000 ransomware attacks last year, with cybercriminals targeting largely parts of the country's infrastructure. Reasons for this: it's been concluded that it's neglect of IT systems. That is no disrespect to the professionals who are working on them, of course, just a neglect of this location or the department itself. Pandemic-related security issues like work from home, the growing popularity of and anonymity of cryptocurrencies, and companies' general willingness to pay up out of fear of interruption of their business. So this is becoming an hourly occurrence, or actually an every 6-minute occurrence. So what are your thoughts, Peter, about how should we factor this into day-to-day operations management of an organization and not just the actual cybersecurity silo?
Yeah, I mean, ransomware is here to stay. It makes a ton of money. I think last year, it was about 400 million, according to Washington Post, is what some of the crypto wallets they were tracking made. So that's a pretty decent payday for very little risk. And I only think it's going to get exponentially worse. So if you're a company, it's no longer a cyber issue. This is an operational and business issue. So the first thing I would do is treat it like a disaster. An earthquake comes, or a hurricane, and it knocks out part of your infrastructure. Can you still do business?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're going to have to treat it just like that, right? Make sure you're resilient. Make sure you have backups, and just expect it to happen, either to a part of your infrastructure, or in some cases, your entire infrastructure. And if you are resilient, then you don't have to pay. And if you don't pay, then you don't perpetuate the crime.
Could you imagine as a CISO, sitting at the C-suite table, however, talking about that kind of resilience, where you can say, well, a flood, the odds of a flood happening in a year may be sort of 1 in 100, but the odds of a cyber attack like this may be what, 1 in 2, 1 in 10? What number would you give to get the powers that be to sit up and take more notice?
I wouldn't give it a number. I would say I would take it more from a perspective of, this is what the impact would be if we were to lose a couple critical segments of our operational infrastructure.
Right.
And once you tie it to dollars, then you start, you can get some down to brass tacks then.
Right, so just think about the actual impact, absolutely. Well, while this was happening, or it's continuing to happen, of course, with the big news for last week was the meeting in Geneva and in Europe, in which President Biden did get to meet up with President Putin and delivered to him a list, a no-hacking list. This was perhaps in parallel with the sort of the standard 16 critical infrastructure sectors, but this was one that reminded or sought to remind them that areas like dams and emergency services and financial services should not be touched, and that Russia had a responsibility to curb malicious cyber activity in its own country. And thirdly and finally, that each together should be working on specific understandings of détente of what's off limits. So, do you, or what do you think President Biden would expect to get from this kind of gesture?
I think this is a massive signal. And first one for a while. I think during the Obama administration, there was some posturing, if you will, from the U.S. That if a cyber attack were to occur against critical infrastructure, they would treat it in many cases as a physical attack. And this is reestablishment of that signal, and that is a core component of deterrence. Without clear communication of what your red lines are, you're not going to deter anything. And honestly, the only way you're going to get any traction in cyberspace right now is with deterrence. So I'm hoping that this is not just bluster, that this is followed up with clear communication after another incident occurs, like the Colonial Pipeline. But we will see.
I was going to mention, I mean, the Colonial Pipeline, there was two lobs across the net there. I mean, in terms of the fact of the actual recovery of the funds in such a swift and efficient way, I'm wondering whether that carried any weight with this kind of a bargain, because it was certainly a substantial, I think, victory in that particular situation.
It was. I'm just hoping that it doesn't get everyone's expectations up. Uh,
Yeah.
and again, going back to that 400 million number for ransomware, the amount of funds that were recuperated from that, minuscule, right? So don't expect it, but I'm hoping that maybe that also adds to the deterrence theme.
Well, this week has been one that we've had a number of stories about what seems to be another standard, which is password leaks in the millions and billions. One of the most recent ones this week, anyway, is RockU 2021. 8.4 billion passwords leaked online. That is, to my knowledge, more than all the human beings on Earth. And I mean, that's obviously because we have many passwords. It's one of the largest. It was a 100 gigabyte text file that had all kinds of stuff, just not passwords, but also other kinds of data as well. And the issue, of course, that we in the community are trying to remind people of is just because your password faded, 5 years ago, you stopped using it, doesn't mean that it's not active for some kind of thing, including password spraying and credential stuffing and so on. So this is one of just many stories that is happening about millions or billions of passwords and other kinds of data being captured. So what is your thought? I ask every guest every week this kind of question, but what do you think we can do to convince people of the fact that this is an actual tangible threat, even for passwords that they have forgotten about from years back?
You're not going to be able to do anything.
Okay.
I give
How
up.
you really feel? Yeah.
Right? I mean, over 8 billion passwords. I mean, for context, I think there's only 7.6 billion people on Earth.
Yeah.
So, and out of those, I think only like 4 billion or something actually have internet. So the fact that, from an odds perspective, going back to what are your odds for being hacked, I mean, there is a really high probability that one of your passwords has been stolen. Especially every individual. If you think about how many passwords you have across the internet, right? So, I just think the only thing that's going to save us over time is a savvier generation coming in, where they're using password managers. Everything's online. They realize it a little bit more thoroughly that they have to protect themselves. And so I haven't given up on the elderly or the older
Yeah.
generations.
Over 40 set? Yeah.
I know, right? But it's tough. I mean, until they get poked, right? Until something happens, they get poked with a sharp stick. They're probably not going to change. If you haven't heard all of the issues thus far over the last few years, and and you've dodged the bullet, and you haven't had your identity stolen or something hacked, congrats. You've beat the odds, and it's only a matter of time until people start getting smart and using things like password managers.
Okay, so you're placing your money on the next generation then, who are savvy and comfortable with these kinds of things. And so have you seen that? That's my question. Have you seen more use of password managers amongst, let's say, younger professionals in their 20s?
Yeah, I mean, I have a cousin that, excuse me, not cousin, a nephew that just interviewed me for his class. and asking about what should they do from a security perspective, right? We went over like how to create a secure password, what is a password manager. I think that it's on the curriculum. If it's not established a piece of the curriculum, it's something that a lot of teachers are savvy of and are starting to teach, which I'm very encouraged with. Now it's a sample size of one, but that's I'm hoping that it's indicative of a larger push.
It's good to see. So their savvy might also come in handy when it comes to things like counterfeits. And this is another big story we had this week was a chip shortage, which we're seeing, of course, as an offshoot from the pandemic and just simply a cutback on supply chain and on manufacturing. Uh, Anticipating a chip crisis coming from this chip shortage, which is coming from the Independent Distributors of Electronics Association, saying that spikes in demand for computers and so on are not obviously being met by this shortage, which means that we should be expecting knockoff chips, cheaply designed from scratch, or even previously used chips that have been removed and cleaned to look new, which is always interesting. So this is a serious threat because they might work for a while, some of these knockoffs, but when the actual pressure gets high, they may fail. And there's many places where we don't want those chips to fail under crisis periods. So do you have any insight as to how we can, as an industry, be more efficient at detecting counterfeit chips? Is there something that can be done this way?
Hey, I'm all for chip recycling, right? So if that's a way to do it, no. Sadly, you're not going to be able to detect it. You're not going to be able to figure
Okay.
it out. The only thing you can really do, I mean, unless you're like the DoD or the feds and you're doing X-ray scans and you're able to detect, minuscule flaws within the production. Good luck, right? And that's not going to happen. 99.9% of the companies out there are not looking at that. So, what is your best bet? You're going to really have to ensure that your suppliers are supplying you genuine goods. So, if you're like, wow, that's a great deal, I'm getting it for 30 or 40% off the going market rate, there's probably a reason for that, right? So talk with your suppliers, no matter how established, and make sure that you're getting genuine parts from the actual distributors versus third-party knockoffs. I mean, that's literally the only way you're going to be able to counter this.
So yeah, the old story, if it's too good to be true, then it likely is. Our sponsor for this week is Kiavi Data. Kiavi, with all the security and cybersecurity tools that you have, why is your data still vulnerable? You're assuming that data cannot protect itself, but you know what? Now it can. If you need to revoke access after data leaves your possession, if you need to authorize remote locations in real time, or change permissions on the fly, well, you know what? Seeing is believing. So we invite you to sign up at kiavi.com/sessions and take control of your data today. So, Peter, we are back, and another interesting kind of development, that one of these things that I like to follow the human side of a lot of this kind of change, is that there's a bill that's passed in Ireland which gives police power to compel passwords. And this has just come out as a bill. And what it means is that when they're executing a search warrant, they can now look for passwords, and they can fine you up to €30,000 and 5 years in jail for non-compliance. It requires police to make a written record on doing a stop and search, including location, age, gender, and ethnicity. So this is a new development in the way that the Irish police are looking to find out more information. They are promising, of course, this is going to stay clear, transparent, and accessible, of course. But my question to you is, does this sound like a slippery slope of police powers, as we're seeing also here in the US? Or is this just simply the police keeping up with the times?
I mean, it is the slipperiest of slopes, and it's something that has been, uh, you know, thought of and broached many times, right? Everything from the Clipper chip back in the day to having an established backdoor for systems. Um, Man, I'm not a fan of it. I mean, how do you rein that in? I mean, does this
Hmm.
mean when a cop pulls you over for a speeding ticket and they want to search your car, they can say, "Hey, I want your password for your phone,"
Yeah.
and because I just want to see if you're doing anything illegal on that. I mean, God, what a crazy instance where this could just get really out of hand, and it's a shame. I think this is a very difficult area. Where do you draw the line for privacy versus public safety? The San Bernardino shooters, for example, where their phones were locked. FBI had to crack it using third party
Hmm.
techniques. Um, Man, I don't like it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a big fan of privacy, but personally, I'm not a fan of this. I'm hoping that this never does get over to the U.S. And I bet if it does, you're gonna have the ACLU and like the EFF just going bonkers. So not a fan of it.
Yeah, it does seem, and it would be interesting to have the opposite, so the opposing argument from someone who is in law enforcement, or just simply saying this is what you got to do to keep up with what's going on, since everything is now on a person's phone. But I do tend to agree, it can be, it's rife for abuse, I believe, and could be a dangerous place to be in. But these are the times that we're in. So Ireland, again, is a very technologically advanced country. There's a lot of companies like Facebook and others that are operating there. So it would be interesting to see this as a test case. So we'll have to see how that turns out. In the meantime, it may be a face from the past. A face of Anonymous was deported from Mexico this week to face hacking charges in the U.S. I find it interesting that the Anonymous, which still seems to be around, comes down in a sense to this individual, Christopher Doyen. He actually lived in Toronto for a while and then moved down, skipped bail, and was down in Mexico. Wrote a book even about this. So it's not like he's actually being anonymous himself. But he is now facing charges for hacking. And I mean, Anonymous was known in the past for things such as taking down PayPal in 2010 when it suspended payments to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and other major high profile takedowns. So, do you see Anonymous as having lost sort of a major player here? Have you seen them losing power or influence over the years? Are there other ones that are more substantial and more worrisome right now? Or do you see them as still being a powerful player?
I mean, who's to say this guy's actually legit, or how big of a player he is? He certainly talks a big game. And I wonder if Elon Musk is going to reach out to him because I think Anonymous just threatened Elon for Bitcoin manipulation. So, Anonymous will always be around. They are a decentralized collective. They typically really only get involved with social justice type of attacks. Last year, actually, they had quite a few things that occurred. I think the BLM, they sided with BLM, and I think, were responsible for some of the attacks on different precincts and things like that. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily whether or not it's a question that they're still relevant. I think they will always be relevant. It's just going to be a matter of from a decentralized volunteer organization, are they eventually going to hit the jackpot and have another attack? And then 2 years from now, we're going to be like, holy moly, they are, this huge power. No way of knowing. But
Yeah.
I think they'll always be around.
I think so. I mean, I'd love to learn more about them. I mean, I can't imagine, even though this gentleman was the face of Anonymous, as the news is putting it, it's a much larger and much more well organized organization than just that. So I tend to agree. I think that they're always around, and I do honestly think that's a good thing. It's the kind of the other side to the story we had a moment ago about the police information as well. So for those who are nerds for leaked software before it becomes real. Windows 11 was leaked this week, or supposedly anyway. It was an ISO image was leaked on a Chinese-speaking forum, and users are rushing to install the new leaked operating system. I was reading through some of the features of Windows 11. It's kind of like Windows 10, just apparently anyway, with some cosmetic changes, with some rounded corners and stuff like that, and a few improvements. But it's still early days for this, of course. Bleeping Computer was printing this out and just sort of saying, for example, that this could be a fake, it could be
Yeah.
manipulated, and so people who are looking to download this and play with it should look to do it on a safe sandbox environment in case it has been manipulated and is actually a malware type trick. So, um, is that what you would think? I mean, your knowledge of this kind of thing in terms of pre-releasing of software. Do you think this could be one of these gifts that might be ticking if you listen to it, or is it just normal pre-release for Microsoft?
Yeah. I mean, well, first off, this isn't the first time a Windows OS was released before it was ready, right? I think it's happened multiple times. From a cybersecurity professional standpoint, God, these things are a wreck. I mean, if you want to look at majority of like botnets out there, they're all pirated XP and different Windows boxes that have just perpetuated over the years. because if it's not licensed, you're not getting updates, and without
Mm.
updates, you're not fixing security flaws. So I would say even if this was a legit OS and it didn't have any backdoors, because there's no support, because you could have just security flaws out the wazoo. God, do not download it, install it. Um, do I think it's been compromised? Who knows? Probably not the initials, is my gut saying. Probably not the initial one that came out, but I guarantee you got 50 or 60 different hacking shops out there now putting out a new variant of it and saying like, "Hey,
Right.
download for free from here. Check it out."
Exactly.
So, oh my God, do not download it. It
I'm
is a bad
thinking
idea.
I'm thinking of all those work from home people who are dropping it
Oh
onto
my
their
God.
computer to try it out. And this is what's going
Yeah.
to have us almost like an air gapped computer to play with this kind of stuff. So, last story. You know what, Peter? I mean, it's the 20 minutes has gone by already. It's just unbelievable. I want to just share the last story with you here because this is an area that, again, fascinates me. Critical flaws in a defibrillator management tool posing an account takeover and credential risk for hospitals. This is just a story about the Zoll defibrillator dashboard that can allow hackers to take control over a system. And we had a story last week similar to this with regards to pacemakers. And here we've got the Achilles heel in this story is the use of hard-coded cryptographic keys in the actual application. So my question really to you is not so much about, this is a surprise because it's not, but the whole notion of hard-coded passwords. We hear this story all the time. So hard-coded passwords or even hard-coded cryptographic keys, which according to one of the people in the story, gives people a false sense of security. So what is your thought about hard-coded? Do we need them anyway, or is this something else that should sort of see its sunset?
I mean, if you're putting your operational hat on, everyone's going to say, yeah, you need them. But from a security perspective, no, it's a bad idea. Um, it, it, it's it's tough to say. I would say I would err on the side of do not go with it,
Yeah,
if at all possible. If that is compromised, it's done, right? So, uh, and it's not just you. If it's a hard-coded key, and that's a shared key, in particular, and there's a lot of hardware out there that have those type of maintenance passwords and everything else that are hard-coded.
yeah,
God help you.
yeah.
So generally speaking, do not go that route. If you are a product designer or you're a company thinking about it, make the extra effort.
Right, right. Yeah, just again, increased sophistication about how weak these areas can be when these convenience factors come in. So this was again 20 minutes. It went by so fast. I'm just wondering whether you have any particular stories from this collection that stand out to you as your favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the God, that's tough. I would probably say the ransomware one. We're finally getting some actual like reliable numbers in that space. And for a long time, it was completely guesswork. You
Hmm.
had to report it to like Pew or some of the other research organizations for them to count whether or not you've been hacked, and nobody wants to tell anybody anything. So they're starting to get a lot better with figuring out the scope of the problem, and that is hopefully going to shine a light and get this fixed.
Well, excellent, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very brief but very informative get together. How would you like people to reach out and connect with you? Are you on LinkedIn, or where would you like people to talk with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is best. Peter Liebert. You'll see me up there. I got a bald head and I'm wearing a suit, and I look very happy. So I
It,
don't look like a CISO. No, I'm just kidding.
it's a
Yeah, I'm
great
on there.
picture. It's a great picture.
I'm generally happy, so it's okay. Absolutely there. Yeah,
Abs-
LinkedIn is the best spot.
Fantastic. Well, Peter Liebert, the CISO at Cerner Government Services, I want to thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
So there we go. We have another session done here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and also want to thank our sponsor, Kiavi Data. Remember also, the learning never stops. So come and check us out tomorrow. Our Friday video chat is Hacking Self-Defending Data, an hour of critical thinking on how and when your data can intelligently protect itself. It's fascinating. It's an amazing technology. So check that out, of course. And when you want more information about what's going on in the world, make sure to join us every day for the Cybersecurity Headlines podcast, 6 minutes or so every day with the stuff you need to know. So I will be back next week. Again, take care, stay safe. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.